Quay greetings. Welcome to another video. Thank you for joining us. Um, so in our last video, we were establishing that first contact Indians are the only Indians that have documented proof that they were here before colonizers got here. So automatically, you have land authority. Now, the tricky part is getting all Indians to identify as first contact Indians. It's the only way we're going to get our land back. If you are civilized, you're going to have some rigmarole, because an argument can be made that you were not the first thing here. Some people, I think, might welcome that. And whereas some people who, I don't know why they wouldn't, but they are too married to being known as a civilized tribe. The word Cherokee gets thrown around so much, but I think people forget that these are civilized Indians, all of them. But with that label, you're telling the world that you're civilized. With an Algonquin label, you're telling the world you were first contact. And I'm telling you now, we were all Algonquin speaking, as hard as that may be to believe. We were not some, warring people. This is evidenced by colonizers' first 80 years here. There's no wars to be spoken of except us trying to fend him off. Um, we saw in the timeline there was just no mention of Iroquois at all. So they were not warring with Algonquins. That would have been spoken of if there was such warring going on. What it was is Algonquins, as they were being civilized in certain parts of the land, namely the South, they were given a different name. So then colonizer could sort of say, well, these nice civilized Indians in the South, they didn't mind giving us their land, like these damn Algonquins minded very much. The Algonquins, they want to act like they own this land. Yeah, that's because we did. But colonizer don't act, he don't want to deal with you as the first contact. He wants some other Indians that he could say are first contact, but they wasn't. But by making them over, he gets to be first and he gets to make you second. If he renames you into some other Indian that quote unquote like works with him, and oh my God, they just happen to have the best land too. How fortunate we were. No, no, you renamed Algonquins and said that that wasn't our land. But these nice civilized Indians were more cooperative with you taking the best land that we all shared as Algonquins. So that's what's going on here, ladies and gentlemen. But what you're looking at on the screen, um, I guess we jumped right into it. So a lot of what we're dealing with is in the category. This whole legal system is in the category of corporate and commerce. So what happens with commerce, apparently, and commercial law is that men and women, for some reason, unbeknownst to the average man and woman of the land, for some reason, corporate and commerce seeks to fictionalize men and women. So this thing created by men and women, namely, I guess it would be the priesthood and the nobility. I think that's who it would have to be. they come up with a random idea that men and women cannot engage in commerce without being made over into corporate fictions. So what we wanted to do today is examine why that is. Who made this rule up? And we want to try to figure out why. Where did it come from and why? What is the logic behind men and women being made into? Now, when we say a corporate entity, I hope most of my audience knows that what we're talking about is when your name has to be capitalized. In law and virtual type of legal system, your name is being capitalized. And when your name is capitalized, you have been made over into a corporate fiction. So you never wrote your name in all capitals. And even if you did, it was not so that you can engage in commerce. You were just having fun with your name. But in law, when they take your name and capitalize every letter, you have just been made into a corporation, basically. And they are engaging you in commerce, and they own that newly created you. You see, this is what's happening with Indians as well. When they when they do something with your name, whether it be capitalize it, that's one of the most insidious ways, or changing it from Algonquin to Iroquois, saying that Iroquois is a language when the people known as Iroquois didn't have writing. It doesn't make sense, ladies and gentlemen. They found a people here that had writing, but they're insisting that the ones that didn't have writing were more, uh, ready for civilization than the ones who had writing. And that doesn't even make sense. The So let's say that again. They are in this corporation. They give all props to Iroquois, one of the smallest groups of Indians in their New York State area land. Is one of the smallest patches of land compared to what Algonquins had. And colonizer wants us to think that they had more interest in these people's politics. That the colonizers trying to say that because they had a certain type of legal system, they were so precious to us. No, you don't give a damn about any Indian's legal system. What you care about is that Indian's land. Do not be fooled by colonizers' silliness. He don't give a crap about your law. That's why we're under English law right now. If he loved Iroquois law so much, why didn't he just go with that? And then it wouldn't be English law. It would just be Iroquois law. He's not interested in Iroquois laws. In fact, Iroquois is merely a creation of colonizing. Remember, Iroquois is an Algonquin word. And as far as we know, they tended to call them Iroquois more than they did Haudenosaunee. I think they realized, oh, we got to come up with a new name because Iroquois kind of is a dead giveaway. How's it a dead giveaway? It's an Algonquin word. What does that mean? You're dealing with Algonquin Indians. They wouldn't be called Iroquois if they were Iroquois and Iroquois was something other than Algonquin. Stay with me, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with me. Sometimes ancestors do that like that. If Iroquois were a language and a people unto themselves, they would never call themselves uh, Iroquois. They wouldn't do that because they'd have their own language and they'd have their own name, and it would be an Iroquois word. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? Let's try to see if we could give one of our crazy examples. Um, okay, we're going to use the Jewish. We're going to try to use the Jewish situation. Uh, a Jew would not want to call themselves by what a Nazi called them. Uh, you see what I'm saying? Um, because it would it would be a way of honoring your worst enemy if they're saying that Iroquois and Algonquins were enemies. So I'm not going to call myself what my enemy called me. Like, say my enemy wants to call me an asshole. I don't walk around saying I'm an asshole. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? I'm going to choose my name, and it's not going to be something derivative of what my enemy would call me in his language. Like if it was a Spanish person and I was an American Indian and a person called me what's that word they used to use, punta or something like that. I'm not going to go around and say, "Hi, I'm the Punta tribe." You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? It would it wouldn't even go down in history books. I would never, as a organized group of what five different tribes, I would never take we wouldn't call ourselves the Punta Confederacy. We would not do that, ladies and gentlemen. Why did they have to use an Algonquin word, ladies and gentlemen? Because that was the only language, ladies and gentlemen. A colonizer couldn't make up an Indian language word, so he had to borrow one from the Algonquins, the first people he found here. So because he couldn't make up a word, we would know that it wasn't our language. So they had to use our language. When I say our language, what am I saying? I'm saying Iroquois language was Algonquin. Iroquois, the word, is Algonquin. So when Indians feel like they're getting a little bit fed up with how I'm talking, please try to remember it's because you have been divorced from your Algonquin identity and you think you're an Iroquois, you think you're five civilized tribes, one of those. You're Algonquin at first, but when Moors infiltrate you, Moors do not accept you as you are. They have to make you over to pull you out of your first position. You see what I'm saying? So these videos are not to make the five civilized angry. It's not to make the Iroquois angry. It's to get them to identify as what they are. Come on, when Iroquois is screaming that you're an Algonquin, your name alone. Okay? So this is a call for all Indians to go back to being the first thing that colonizer found here, because if you're not, he's going to challenge you. We don't need to be challenged by a foreigner. Is seeing their day of reckoning on the horizon. What am I saying? Anything we do, we better do it as first contact Indians. We better do it as first contact, not second. Everything I'm looking at is saying that they ran into Algonquins. Now, with the last video, we saw something about Iroquois meeting the Dutch, right? So there you have again some little side story. Remember, I said they're going to make up a little side story. Yeah, in fact, they did. There's a story about Iroquois meeting the Dutch. And I looked into that. Unfortunately, the Dutch did not meet Iroquois first. Even in that side story, the Dutch met Algonquins first. And then the land that they got allegedly from Iroquois was Algonquin land. It's pitiful, ladies and gentlemen, how desperate they are to divide us into Iroquois and Algonquin when we were all Algonquin. So we kind of went off on a tangent, but that was the last video we spoke about. And I bring it up because it's very similar to what we're looking at here, where a renaming is taking place. You're given a new identity, all capital identity that makes you ready to engage in law. So you make the laws, and then the laws remake you. And that's what colonizer system does. If you make the laws should not remake you. And what I'm saying is in this legal system, your name is going to be capitalized. That's a commercial thing and a legal thing. And this legal system is commercial. Okay. So where was it established that men and women must be made into corporate fictions to engage in commerce? Is it a legal thing? Yes, it is. So ChatGPT tells us, let's have a little sidebar, ladies and gentlemen. I've been fortunate to hear some Indians talk about using ChatGPT. Um, I've heard, I watch other YouTube channels here and there, and one of the things I caught was that some Indians feel like using ChatGPT is the way to go. I want to make a case for why ChatGPT is um, especially when you can get it to uh, speak the truth. And you can, there's little ways you can get it. I mean, over time they will change it. I will say that's the only thing. A colonizer, he's not really going to make a platform, and that's probably why the Indian says that it's not a great thing to talk to Chat GPT. But I'm telling you right now, we're coming into a place where we're not going to have a choice, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm going to say this without mentioning my firm's name or anything like that. I can tell you that it's hitting the legal field hard. Artificial intelligence is hitting the entire legal field hard. When I tell you law firms are incorporating AI heavily, heavily, so what I'm saying is if it's being used in what we currently have as a legal system, we probably want to know a little bit about how it's being used, how it works, the problems that of about it. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this legal system, that our current legal system, it's not ours, but it's here, right? It is what it is, right? Why and how can the legal field is getting to where it's being said that you can't talk about the legal field. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. As an American Indian, this was not supposed to be our legal system. So my argument to a legal system that is now saying that basically citizens cannot talk negatively about the legal system. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Yes. I was shocked when I saw that. And this is a while ago. This is now, I don't think they are enforcing it hard, but it is in the mix, ladies and gentlemen. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. It's getting to where you cannot speak negatively about the entire legal field, period. Now, again, they're not enforcing it, but it is out there. Now, myself as an American Indian, now this is something that a citizen is going to have to deal with. I'm telling you, it's just not looking good. This system is, I don't, it's just not looking good, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. A lot of the quote unquote freedoms, I just feel like they're being, as we've seen, what's happening? You tell me. You tell me. I'm not even going to say it. You tell me what's happening to your rights, citizens. American Indians, you were not supposed to be in this legal system. And if you have Indians that are trying to make you think that you're supposed to be under this jurisdiction as a what? Domestic dependent. Where's that in the Constitution? I'm not, I'm okay. When I say in the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, you got to understand. No, I'm not saying that we are under the Constitution either, but I'm saying you would have to be able to show us in the Constitution the word domestic dependent because it's not there. But if you're going to argue it, you would have to show it to us. Why can't they show? I'm going to tell you why they can't show it to us, ladies and gentlemen. Domestic dependence is something that derived from the doctrine of discovery. Your argument as an American Indian is that you never consented to the doctrine of discovery. Say it as many times as you need to yourself, but know it. You have a legal system here that was not supposed to pull you into its jurisdiction, but because it's going by the doctrine of discovery, it can pull you into its jurisdiction. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? And it did. So what I'm trying to say is technically, if they're going to make us act like the Constitution applies to American Indians, we have to tell them that there's no such thing as a domestic dependent in the Constitution. You were supposed to be doing quote unquote commerce with Indian tribes. But you're not going by the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. And what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that's why it's void. But it's void for many reasons. It's void because we did not agree with the doctrine of discovery, and it's void because the Church of Rome voided it. The Church of Rome has voided everything that keeps American Indians from enjoying their land freely, meaning shit is free for you. Free. What we're seeing, the trend we're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, and you see it clear as day. This system knows that American Indians are going to start pulling out of paying taxes. So right now, how it's making up for it is prices are like going like out the freaking roof, out the freaking dome right now. It is crazy to go buy groceries or anything these days. It is absolutely, you can't even, you walk away thinking, wow, 5 items and I just paid up $20 for each. 5 small items. And it's like over $100 or damn near. Okay, we're going off topic a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, but it does have to do with commerce, right? Okay. That's why things will have to be free for American Indians. If you stop paying taxes, what this system is going to do is overcharge you for everything else. Do you see now why Indians have to be made to, as if their debts are paid? We don't owe the system anything. If you're raising prices because the tax game is going away, you're still robbing me for no reason at all. What, to maintain your lifestyle? Listen, you could do that in your homeland. You can't make me pay you when the land is mine. You haven't paid rent, what, since what, 1493? So what does an American Indian owe to this government? Not a damn thing. What does it owe us? Everything. So now let's commence to read. Where was it established that men and women must be made into corporate fictions to engage in commerce? It basically, the short answer is in English law. Okay, this is not an American system, it's an English system. Okay, there is not a single historical legal moment where courts or governments officially declared men and women are separate from commerce, but a straw man entity tied to them can enter commerce. Okay, so they're saying it really wasn't actually established at any one time. And the shit that they do over a period of time is worse than what they do at one time. We should know that by now, right? What they did with colored, Negro, and all that. So over time, it's worse than if they just did it at one time, right? So when they tell us this was not a single historical moment, fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen, because it's worse than a single moment. Okay? It's being eased into. It's causing chaos. It's deceit. And there is not a single historical legal moment where courts or governments officially declared men and women are separate from commerce, and a straw man entity tied to them can enter commerce. That exact doctrine is not part of recognized mainstream law, but it's there in mainstream law. Excuse me. However, the idea developed from several older legal traditions that do distinguish between the natural human being and the legal or commercial entity used in transaction. Let's read that again. However, the idea developed from several older legal traditions that were not American, because we're colonized people. So several older European, African legal, or should we say North African legal commercial systems that do distinguish the natural human being. So it's like there's, I ain't gonna go there, but it's like when they say natural human being, the way this system works is being a human being, just saying you're a human being is not saying you're natural. You see what I'm saying? That's how the system works, ladies and gentlemen. When they have to put the natural human being, they're kind of telling you right there that there's other human beings that's not natural. The legal or commercial entity used in transactions. So there's two different things: the natural human being and the legal commercial entity used in transactions. We're going to stop for a minute, ladies and gentlemen, and let's go with what the flow of what the ancestors are kicking out. As I'm reading that, what what shows up in my spirit is what you're looking at is the first realization that a natural human being does not have to be responsible for what a legal or commercial entity does. You see? So let's put a note here. Let's pin a note here. What ChatGPT basically has shown us here is that a natural human being is putting on an identity that it can take off. That's why corporations outlast, their owners, but in a janky kind of way. Because if the corporation, let's say, has been faulty, it should probably not exist anymore. But when it is a mask, when the corporation is the mask gets to be put on somebody else's face, right? So this is what's going on here. So here is where those concepts actually came from historically. Let's see where the concept of creating a fictitious entity came from. Roman law, number one. Let me ask you something, ladies and gentlemen. Are we in Rome or is this America? So this stuff started in the same place the church uh, started, and the same church that came up with the doctrine of discovery. I add. Did the concept of having a false identity come from? Came from Rome. Back then, Rome was Negro. These are Moors we're talking about. But when they replace themselves, they get to blame their actions on another group of people. They are heavily into their Jacobite game, y'all. The bait and switch sort of thing going on. Having a sacrifice, a whooping boy. When it's time for Moore to get his ass whipped, he gonna look for a whooping boy to take the beating for him. This is the duplicative uh uh nature of a Moor. It dawned on me the other day that there's only three fully human looking signs in the zodiac. It's the Virgin and the twins. Other than that, there is no single fully human thing. I just found that a little bit interesting. Well, Aquarius, we might have to say that he's a fully human. Yeah, yeah. Actually, let's scratch that. Aquarius is he's human, right? That's very interesting. Vera, Aquarius. In the age of Aquarius, and that seems to be the best time to be in, apparently. There's something up with the twins, y'all. And it's giving me a Jacob Esau vibe. And then the Virgin is giving me a Rebecca vibe. Yeah. The one who goes with the second born twin. Does the idea of a fictitious entity come from? Roman law. We Glenn Fern, he is heavy in describing this as a Roman cult, and he's correct. Glenn Fern is a state national. State nationals are here standing on states that were created by nobility, but the way state, like we said before, the way state nationals understand it, and I would have to say they're correct, at least in their system, they're correct when they say that the states existed before the federal government, so the federal government really should not have made them United States citizens. But my what I might have to say to a state national is, but you're standing on something that you didn't create as well. Now, if you created the state, then you could really argue for the state. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? But a state national is arguing for a stretch of fictitious land called a state that was created by what? His king. So, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that's why I decided I'm not supposed to be a state national, not when I'm an American Indian. So I had to leave. And the ancestors, let me tell you, they were working as soon as I started, the ancestors were pulling me out. They knew that I needed to learn from the state nationals, but they gave me heavy, oh my God, they gave me one heavy clue that from that moment on, I knew I was not going to be a state national, but I rode for a little while until I got a little more educated. It takes time, ladies and gentlemen, for you to feel your legal authority, your lawful authority. So at first, you're going to be afraid because you don't know how the system works. That's how I know it's not our legal system. But as an American Indian, what you will find is I don't have to know this legal system. I can know how they maneuver, but I have to know it doesn't apply to me. I was never supposed to be under the jurisdiction of a system that came here without my agreement. So that becomes your legal strength. It is, and it's extremely valid. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Heru ain't going to mislead you on this one. Mm-mm. Mm. Um, why? Because I want what you want. I think I want it more. I'll be honest with you because I just, ladies and gentlemen, my spirit, what's in me, was never meant to be a slave, and that's the only way I could explain it. I don't know any other way to say it. And so once I apply myself and I realize that the entire system has worked overtime to make me a slave, that's when that's when that's when I began to break free, shall we say. I am not going if you can't stand to me in my face and tell me that you are making me your slave, then you really have my disdain. You really, this slavery is done in such a way that you could never guess that you've been made a slave. That's how, if forgive my French, ladies and gentlemen, that's how pussy the system is. It's so beneath true nobility. To be a noble, you have to be noble. This bullshit we see is not nobility. I don't know what they think it is. You don't have noble qualities. Somewhere in nobility is a respect for truth. I don't see that, ladies and gentlemen. I see lies being used. I see deceit being used. And I see a cover up of all of that. And it's not going to work. So we done talked away from what we were talking about. Uh, it's horrible, ladies and gentlemen. So I was saying that the state nationals, unfortunately, at the base of their fight, is they're fighting for something that they didn't create. You can't fight for something you didn't create and win. And that's just something the state nationals are going to have to come to realize that, yes, you're fighting a great fight. It's just that you're not on your birthright. You have to go, if you want to break away from your king, you have to go where your king actually lives and what he thinks belongs to him. You got to challenge that. But what you have is a very crafty king who studied demonology. Yeah. And he figured out ways to make himself rather invisible, I would have to call it. So I guess he figured, how would it be to have a kingdom, quote unquote, that's not on my land, and I will never really be vulnerable to attack if I'm somewhere else and I'm running the show on somebody else's land and I dump a bunch of my subjects on some other person's land. And then without even knowing it, they're doing my bidding by even being there. Them just being there is first of all, it's a war tactic by a king. But the bottom line is these people don't have a right to land here. These state nationals, they're standing on something that's fictitious. It's called a state. So although you can argue that the United States can't make you over, you've already been made by something foreign by being attached to a state, and you are attached to a state. You are not attached to the land. That's why it was made fictitious, ladies and gentlemen, because they had to get rid of men and women owners of the land and make everybody a fiction. Now, who's acting like the real man or woman when every citizen and even the American Indians have been made into fictitious entities? It's the same king or queen that dumped you here. This was the plan. They are acting as the men and women owners, and everybody else is a corporate fiction to be bought and sold as slaves. So, the fight of a state national is not to fight for America or anything in America. The fight of a state national begins in their homeland. They have to go back home and make their home a happy home. They have been displaced. And yes, this is all they know, but unfortunately, it's not their home. It's not their homeland. They can't create anything here without the agreement of American Indians, but not civilized Indians. You have to be and identify as a first contact Indian to show and prove that you were here before colonizer arrived. A Cherokee was not here before colonizer arrived. Why? Because they're called Cherokee. What would they have to be called to be here when colonizer arrived? They'd have to be called Algonquian. That's what they are. That's what they spoke. Iroquois is not really a language, apparently, because Iroquois, the word itself, is Algonquian. Cherokees are said to speak this fictitious language called Iroquois. So, what are we saying? Cherokee are the first break off from Algonquins. They're the first civilized Algonquins because they are Iroquois. Remember, we saw that the five civilized tribes came after the Iroquois Confederacy. But it seems to me that the Iroquois was the centerpiece of the five civilized tribes because we have to ask ourselves, why are Iroquois in a group of what they're calling Muskogee Indians? The Creek, Seminole, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Seminole, Choctaw, Chickasaw, they are Muskogee speaking Indians. Cherokee is the only one that's speaking Iroquois or said to speak Iroquois. Why are Cherokee in a group of Muskogee speaking Indians? Somehow they migrated from the New York area, which was all Algonquin before Iroquois existed. They somehow migrated from the north where the Iroquois Confederacy is, and they moved on into Algonquin land in the south. But again, it was all Algonquin. It's just that the first breakoff was in the north. That's the Iroquois. Together with colonizer, they made slaves of the Algonquin in the South. You see? Yeah. Now, we don't hear about the Iroquois having slaves in the North with the Iroquois Confederacy, right? Because that's their people. Now, when they go down into the South, now they have slaves. Who are the slaves, ladies and gentlemen? The Algonquins are. Come on, somebody, use your brain, please. Stick with me, stick with me. You'll find that it makes sense. That's all. Why wasn't there slavery in the North where the Iroquois were? Because that was where the Iroquois originated, in the North. But when they moved down to the South, all of a sudden now the South is all about slavery. The five civilized tribes headed by the Iroquois, slaves of who? It has to be the Algonquins. That's how the Algonquins lost land to the five civilized tribes. And then what does the five civilized tribes do? They do the exact same thing Moors do. They change the entire phenotype of the people that were there, from black to, in this case, Mongolian. This is the track record of the Moors. Where they go, they will disappear and another race of people will pop up. It happened in Europe. It happened in Spain. It happens in China. It happens in Japan. It happens in Russia. Everywhere a Moor goes, a new race of people pop up, y'all. And then they say that they're going to bring 97% of American Negroes to their doom. Do you think they mean themselves? Okay, so you have a book by Black Muslims right? Called the Book of Yahoo. In this Book of Yahoo, these Negroes are saying that in America, 97% of Negroes are going to be brought to their doom. But you're a Negro telling me this. So is it you you see your own demise coming, or is that going to be the American Indians? This is where we separate. This is where the separation should be apparent. You think the Moors are going to allow themselves to be genocided to 97 by the tune of 97%? No, ladies and gentlemen, that's you, the American Indian. That's how you know there's a difference between you and a Moor. You think a Moor is going to actually let a prophecy like that happen? He's speaking about it. He's the one that know about this. This is in his religion, not American Indians' religion. American Indians are not Muslim, but your Muslim brother, the Moor, he knew about this prophecy. Do you think that he prophesizing his own 97% doom? When they say brought to their doom, they're talking about a genocide, ladies and gentlemen, not to the tune of 97% of American Negroes. Do you think that Moore is talking about his own demise? Do you think he just stand there and know this is happening? And I wouldn't even write that, ladies and gentlemen. If it was coming for me, I wouldn't even give it life like that. You know what I'm saying? I would just handle that. I would prevent it from happening. But in a quote unquote black man's religion, 97% of American Negroes will be brought to their doom. Obviously, we're not Moors. You're not going to see yourselves genocided. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? Well, after they get rid of American Indians, then they'll say that America is Moorish, and it always was. And then they're going to re-establish their out of Africa theory, and the Indians will be gone if Yaku do what they intended for him to do. So, where does the idea of becoming a fictitious thing come from? They're telling us from Rome. Persona. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a pause. I'm sorry. We shall return shortly. Back, ladies and gentlemen. We had a knock upon the door. Unfortunately, I never invited Verizon for brunch, and they fucked up the first time they overcharged me. We're not doing this again. We not doing this again, Verizon. Run along now. And that's exactly what they did. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So we left off at Roman law. The idea of having a doppelganger originates in Rome. And we must remember at that time, Rome was Negro. Okay. One of the oldest roots is Roman law. Again, this is the idea that you have to have a fake entity so you could rob and steal from people and never get caught. Okay. The Latin word persona meant mask, role, legal character. So we playing games. It's a masquerade ball. That's what this is. My life, huh? From the Roman Negroes, huh? Hmm? That again, ladies and gentlemen, this idea of persona, you know, the ones that Moors always talk about, you got to be in your proper persona. No, that's your shit. We don't do personas in the Americas. It helps us to stay responsible. If you don't wear a mask, you're more likely to act right. If you putting on a masquerade ball mask, that means you looking to deceive, right, Moors? Ain't that what y'all all about? Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to mention names, but word is getting out that a lot of, let's just say, some key figures in the YouTube world, shall we say, of American Indians. It's kind of amazing how many are being advised by Moors. And this is an inside word. We're not talking mentioning any names, but let's just say there's a hidden persona that even right now is trying to advise American Indians in this awakening. Now, this is the time when Moore's supposed to put a lock on it, sit down and watch their world come to an end, right? Because their world is not supposed to be in the Americas. They have a, don't feel sorry for them now. They got a world. Oh, they'll let you know that in a minute. The world that they call the old world, that's their world. But they all about new things because the truth is their old world is actually the new world and America is the old world, you see. But apparently they are busy little bees in the background advising American Indians on English Roman law. Yeah. And that's why so many of us are just coming to like dead ends, getting in trouble with this Roman cult. Because the Moors keep having you go to these Roman priests and get your laws from them, right? But wait a minute. Free to be dominated by Roman law. It decided to dominate me on its own with some papal bulls, right? So the Moor is telling us that this is the only law in town for us, right? He wants us to go by colonizers' laws. At the end of the day, if American Indians just open their eyes and see what's in front of them, you're gonna realize this Negro's telling you to stay in this oppressive system, ain't he? He telling you how to do it. Well, his main offer is to operate in private. Yeah. Be part of the fraud. Don't get rid of it. Become part of it. Like how they did with the Epstein. Then you can't say nothing because you part of it. Then you got to sit down and shut up. No, you don't want no parts of it, American Indians, if you really want to be free. So a persona is a mask? Oh, I have to have a mask on? In my land, you telling me I have to wear a mask in my land? Play a role? Huh? Be a legal character? Oh, so you can take my real identity? I'm walking around with your mask on my face? Saying that I'm from Africa? Oh, that's what you mean? So the idea of your proper persona is something coming from Rome, not from American Indians. And what does a persona mean? It's a mask, a role, a character that can be taxed the fuck out of. And then the real person, that money got to come out of your real pocket, right? American Indian? You playing a character, but your ass is getting taxed, not the character now. Now they're using the character to tax your ass. And then they don't put the character in jail, they want to put you in jail when this happens. So this is the problem with their Roman law. You wearing a mask, but they coming for you, the real person. You see? That's why we don't wear masks as adults. That's for children. And then they call us the wards. Y'all here having a masquerade ball in my country, stealing everything, dressed like the Hamburglar and shit. But the truth is that it's truly who you are, a burglar. So Roman law distinguished between the physical human and the legal role status recognized by society. Society ain't got shit to do with this. The legal role recognized by what? Your king and queen and the church? Because society walking around with a bunch of masks too that they didn't want. Because the legal system automatically makes you an all capital letter persona. So Roman law made they made men and women have to play roles, play games with real shit though, because the real shit is at stake. While you playing games, your land is being stolen from you for real though, right? That's not fake. That's for real. And who's getting paid for buying and selling and renting and all of that of your land? Somebody that's not wearing a mask. The one who's put a mask on you, when it go time to go to the bank, he take the mask off, and life is just lovely, isn't it? Now, for example, let's see the example. Citizen, uh-oh, that's a mask. Slave, uh-oh. Pater familia, your family is a mask in a system. A trustee, office holder. This is one origin of the modern legal person. So, Roman law distinguished between the physical human and the legal status recognized by society. For example, the role of a citizen, the role of a slave, the role of paterfamilias, the role of trustee, the role of office holder. This is one origin of the modern legal person. Number two is the medieval corporate law. Medieval, that's also European. So the Europeans learned this shit from the Romans. During the Middle Ages, European law increasingly recognized churches, guilds, municipalities, universities as artificial legal persons. Why do these things have to be made into persons at all? Is what I'm wondering. This established the idea that the law can create entities that are not flesh and blood humans. But flesh and blood humans will suffer behind these things. You see? They acting like you ain't gonna be bothered because you in a mask. Meanwhile, your real body is doing without or because of these fictitious entities being forced on you because of medieval corporate law and Roman law. That is the foundation of corporations today. English common law. Again, we why is America under English law though? Oh, because we colonized, right? So none of this shit is ours, correct? So why are Indians fighting for this shit? Because they don't know no better. Because a Moor is advising them. Oh, number three is English common law. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, first, so far, nothing American Indian is part of this bullshit, right? Under English common law, the Moors had us believing that we are under common law. I beg to differ. Did we create it? No, it's English common law. So, in English common law, under English common law, distinctions grew between the natural person and artificial persons. A corporation became known as an artificial person created by law. A person created by law. But who created the laws? Your nobility and your church. So the church is supposed to be dealing with living souls, but then they started creating personas. Do they need salvation too? Oh, they get away with their sins. Oh, so that's how you get away with the church's sins. You become a fictitious person and then you can't sin no more? Is that the idea? That's why we're getting fucked over by all these corporations? Hmm? So y'all find a way, or you don't stop sinning, you just find a way to sin without appearing to be sinners. Is that what this is all about? Because American Indians don't know nothing about being no damn sinner. We ain't guilty of nothing except being stolen from by you. And then when we do convert to your religion, guess what? You don't give us our shit back. So you made us sinners, and then once you make us saints, the saints don't get their land back. What gives here? Nothing gives here. This is a theft. A religified, sanctified, holy roller, Holy Ghost, theft. It has nothing to do with going to heaven or hell. These folks put on a mask that allow them to be as ratchet as fuck and torture you while telling you you're a sinner. Yet they don't pay because they're in a fictitious persona. Oh, so number three is English common law. Under English common law, distinctions grew between a natural person and artificial person. A corporation became known as an artificial person created by law. This is where the phrase legal fiction became important. Yeah, when when you're stealing from somebody to not really have to pay for that theft. A legal fiction does not mean fake. So they trying to justify this bullshit. A legal fiction does not mean fake. It means something treated as legally real for administrative purposes. Well, then your administrative stuff must be some BS. Number four, commercial expansion and registration. We know what registration means, right, ladies and gentlemen? Registration systems. That's when the fictitious thing take your shit and it becomes their shit when you register stuff in general. You register your babies, you register your car. Yeah. You're a tenant. Yeah. In your house that you bought and paid for in full, use a tenant, not an owner. So your slave master can put on the mask and take it off at will, but you kind of stuck with that shit on your face, like in the movie The Mask, the shit attached to your face. As governments modernized from the 1600s onward, states increasingly track people through. Now, what is a state? A fictitious entity. Increasingly tracked people through census systems, taxation, birth records, licenses, contract, commercial registration. People gradually became tied into national economic systems. And that economic system is here to bleed you dry and spit you the hell out. They don't give a damn about how you struggling to eat and all of that. That mask and that mask begin to suck the life out of you to transfer what you have to the beast. commercial games with each other. The royals, allegedly royal, uh, and the nobility. People gradually became tied into national economic system and became because this same entity is going to spend money like crazy so that it can have a national debt that it charges to all the fictitious personas. Meanwhile, it's the man and woman trying to live with this mask on their face when American Indians need to take it off and say, what the fuck am I playing games when I have all this land for? Critics later argued humans were increasingly treated like commercial units. That was the whole point, rather than sovereign beings. Yeah, if somebody forced you to put a mask on, the mask of a slave, and they intend to treat you like a slave. This is exactly what happened to American Indians. Critics later argued humans were increasingly treated like commercial units. What, slaves, you mean? Cattle? And then some religions call you cattle rather than sovereign beings. Helped inspire later straw man theories. Uh-oh. This is where you're going to try to say straw man is not real? Is that what's going to happen now? Number five, the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. Oh, Lord. Law confusion. Yeah, that's what it's meant to be, confusing. 20th century, especially after the creation of the Uniform Law Commission and adoption of the Uniform Commercial Code, some researchers began interpreting commercial law as proof that every citizen is a commercial entity. That's exactly what they are. Governments operate entirely through contract law. For the most part, yes, they do. And that's why Indians have to prove that we never had a contract with you. None of your treaties. A ward cannot contract. We got to look that up. Can a ward enter into a legal contract when the guardian is present? Okay, we're gonna do an off camera. Thank God it's not math, right, ladies and gentlemen? Let's ask. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna have to skirt around this one. Can a ward enter into a contract without their guardian uh guardian let's see, approval? Let's see how jiggy they gonna get with this. Maybe that's not the right question. Generally, no. When a legal guardian is appointed to manage an individual's affairs, the ward's legal right to independently enter contracts is typically transferred to the guardian. Let's read that again, ladies and gentlemen. You see why, ladies and gentlemen, we need to be first contact Indians? Do you see that they can't really call us a ward if we were on our land first? But if you are created by them as secondary, they can call you their creation and their ward. So the question, ladies and gentlemen, off camera, it's a little quicker and easier. We don't want to get off the screen. So I will sometimes revert to an off camera cell phone question. So trust me, this is what I'm reading when I enter into AI overview. The question, can a ward enter into a contract without their guardian's approval? What we're trying to establish, ladies and gentlemen, is that you don't have a say. But the person that's doing all your affairs is saying that you entered into a contract with them. I did? So that means it is actually you who made treaties, not me, right? I didn't have a choice because you did it on my behalf. So any treaties that were made after 1493, it was my legal guardian doing all the fancy footwork, not me. I was just saying, Bobby, I need a baba now. That's what was happening. Oh, okay. No wonder I'm so fucked over right now, even as an adult, full grown adult. See, that's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. In this guardianship, it don't. You could be 100 years old and you still an infant to this system. That's how depraved it is. That's how determined to steal your resources it is. So, can a ward enter into a treaty? Let's put some more different wording here. Can a ward enter into a treaty without their guardian's approval? Generally, no. When a legal guardian is appointed by himself to manage oh yeah, right. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, this guardian is self-appointed. Well, they could say that the church sent them. I guess they could, but the church said all of that is done now. They don't need a guardian no more, and your ass is still here, guardian. So, can a ward enter into a treaty or a contract or have a land patent, a legitimate land patent, or any kind of contractual anything, including the Constitution, including civil rights? Can a ward have any say in any of that without their guardian doing the talking for them? The answer, generally no. When a legal guardian is appointed to manage an individual's affairs, the ward's legal right to independently enter contracts is typically transferred to the guardian. Any contracts signed by the ward without the guardian's consent are usually considered void or voidable. Now that's interesting. Any contract signed by, oh, wait. Okay, signed by the ward. Okay, let's get this right. I got it wrong. So say now, ladies and gentlemen, you as an American Indian signed a treaty without the guardian's consent. It's going to be void. But if the guardian was never appointed to you with, by with your consent, that makes the whole thing void. Because actually, what's going on here is they're going to say, well, the guardian did consent to you signing a treaty. But that's the whole problem. Why is a guardian present at all if I'm a sovereign? And you keep saying, I'm sovereign, but I'm a domestic dependent. What made me domestic dependent, ladies and gentlemen? It's not in the Constitution, right? So what does that mean? It means that this government goes outside of the Constitution when it comes to American Indians. This is our argument, but we're not going to appear in any of their courts. You've been dominating me enough. Me going into your court is just me submitting to your jurisdiction that you don't have. So no, we will put the courts on notice. We will, we could write it up, a nice document for you to tell you that our courts decided that you're guilty, a court of our peers, because we've never had peers in any of your courts, and you came up with decisions. So why can't we come up with decisions without you being present? You see how that works, ladies and gentlemen? Sovereign to sovereign. They were sovereign, and in their sovereignty, we didn't get to have peers. We had our colonizer in the court, and we were just the ward. So when we make a judgment as sovereigns, ladies and gentlemen, without our guardian, because we don't need one, our laws will stick. We just have to set them down. We just have to set it in writing. Are they guilty, American Indians, of stealing your land? Yes, they are. Okay, at one time the church said this is legal. This is the right thing to do. This is what God said to do. Go and steal from people. Although in one of his alleged commandments, thou shalt not steal. Well, that's only if you one of your colonizers. Colonizers don't steal from other colonizers, but they can steal from everybody else. So if you're not one of the religions of the colonizer, when they steal from you, it don't count. But when they steal from each other, that's a sin. When they kill each other, oh, that's a sin. When they kill you, nope, not a sin. When they rape you, nope, not a sin. You're the cattle, you're the property, you're the ward. Get it? Now? So let's finish reading this, ladies and gentlemen. Any contract signed by the ward without the guardian's consent. So you see, what I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen, that's a conflict of interest. If you are a ward with all this land and somebody comes and makes themselves your guardian and they make all the decisions on your land, they can steal from you. So any contracts signed by the ward. So say now, ladies and gentlemen, okay, let's change it up a little bit. Say now, American Indians went and signed something. Let's get jiggy with it. We're not going to the United Nations, but let's just say, for instance, they were actually legitimate and we did. Say now we signed something with the United Nations jurisdiction or whatever. Signed it without our guardian, the United States. It's voidable. So say now the United Nations was the go-to. Help us. Oh my God, help us. We're not going to the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. This is just an example. You better not go to the United Nations because that's an entirely other off your land jurisdiction. You need to do shit on your land because that's the only place you'll be in order. You can't go to somebody else's land and make any decisions. I don't care what the United Nations tell you. Again, they have these brokers, right? But the brokers have their own requirements, and then they get to believe that you're in their jurisdiction just by you showing up in their court. I never gave you permission to speak for me, United Nations, for Africa, because they got 54 seats in there. How many seats American Indians got in the United Nations? Well, we wouldn't have seats in the United Nations, you see, ladies and gentlemen, because we're wards. But also, we wouldn't want to be part of the United Nations because they're a creation of your colonizer. So there's a conflict of interest. I don't care what anybody tells you, ladies and gentlemen. They're lying to you, like all Moors do, especially to American Indians. They lie to us and they mislead us. Hell, they don't even want you to be you. You got to change your name when you become an Islamic Moor. So that there, right there tells you you're being diminished, okay? But you're signing into their shit is legitimate. When you take on their name, now you're legitimate. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. You can't do any kind of business with an entity like that. If I'm looking to use Verizon, that they came today knocking on my door, if I wanted to have their service, it shouldn't require me changing my name to obtain their service. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? But that's exactly what your Moorish or religions are requiring you to do. You, in order to be one of us, you can't be you. That's fine because I have no intention of signing up with you. I would like it if you went back to North Africa. I would love that. That would just be the cat's meow for me. Can you do that? Apparently, they don't have enough resources there. Well, you got to do some more praying. Apparently, you're not praying enough. Don't you do that thing where you pray like 4 or 5 times a day? You just whip out your little magic carpet, Moors? So maybe you're not praying enough for your God to give you shit where you don't have to be stealing from American Indians all the damn time. We're not talking about Asian Moors, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the Negro ones. Why? Because we have a bone to pick with them Negroes. Why? Right? We do. We might not have nothing to do with East Asian Muslims. Not really, right? They ain't coming over here like that, like saying that they us or nothing like that, right? They're a distinct people unto themselves, right? With a whole phenotype and everything, right? So we're not talking about East Asian Muslims in the Middle East. We talk about the nigger Muslims, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we talk about. That's what we talk about. Okay? We talk about the buckwheat niggas. Say they that we look like that, but that's how they in our world, that's how they look. Buckwheat. So that is the boys we talk about, ladies and gentlemen, the buckwheat. But this is before they conk their hair and stuff. uh it's a lot of transforming you gotta do to become this, right, ladies and gentlemen? And again, in most cults, they it's not the low level one. They don't know what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of these brothers with the spectacles and the bow tie, they don't know what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. They just American Indians trying to find their identity, being tricked by some salted god. So, ladies and gentlemen, why wards cannot enter contracts independently? This is AI giving me some more. Loss of capacity. In the eyes of the law, the appointment of a guardian signifies that the ward lacks the capacity to make binding financial or legal decisions. So, what does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? The minute they came here, they saw us as wards. So, any contracts they made with us is voidable because it was them and not us making the decision. So, they signed something on their own behalf. Okay, say you were a ward and you had a whole inheritance. The guardian comes and says, "Well, I have to hold this for because this little nigga don't know what he doing. I'll take care of it for him." But they never give it back to you, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we got going on here. Okay, and the Moors are part of it. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. So this is why wards cannot enter contracts independently. So, what does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? Any contract we entered from 1492, we entered in, it wasn't independently. It was duress, it was by force, there was no agreement. Do you understand when I say that all the documents in the United States are void? Right? Because we were wars. They didn't see us as sovereign. They said we're sovereign, no, domestic dependent. So that means we're not sovereign. So they ignored our sovereignty, ladies and gentlemen, while they were signing alleged treaties with us. What was the major document that they that made them able to make us wards? How many times can we say it, right? It was the doctrine of discovery that made us wards, ladies and gentlemen. They could have came here, and if they had the manpower, they would have just gotten rid of us. Instead, they had to lie and pretend that we had the legal authority to enter into any treaties. We did not. We did not. You're not going to hear this on a lot of channels, ladies and gentlemen. The Moors are really busy. They have to be very busy lately. But if you know anything about a ward and a guardian, which is what we are in their legal system, you know that we have never agreed to any of this bullshit. It is not possible. They would have to face us like sovereigns. And in that capacity, they would not be able to do what they're doing to us. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? If they approached us as just sovereigns, they wouldn't have the authority on our land where we don't have any, because they would recognize our sovereignty. They never recognized our sovereignty. They were going through the motions to make you think that you were or that you had any say in this what? Land seizure. That's what it is. Land seizure. land theft. What gave them the quote unquote right to steal your land, ladies and gentlemen? It was the doctrine of discovery. Point number two, guardian authority. In most cases, only the court appointed guardian. Who appointed our guardian, ladies and gentlemen? The Church of Rome. But they have since, as of March 30th, 2023, they ended the guardianship, ladies and gentlemen. We have to get our notices out, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're doing on this channel. That's what my associates and I are doing. Yeah, but we're doing it as first contact Indians. That's the only way. Okay, only way. So let's read this again. Why wards cannot enter contracts independently because of the loss of sovereign capacity. In the eyes of the law, that is our law, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we don't, it's not our laws, it's what imposed on us. But in the United States laws, we are wards. In the eyes of the United States law, and any law that has made laws with the United States or in business with the United States, they are going by this as well, including the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. If the United Nations were legitimate and really up on their game, I'm not saying they are, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just saying if they were, they would recognize right away that we have been given false identities, and they would basically, if they were legitimate, they would make the United States end the fictitious entity process. But as it stands, the UN is a corporation as well. A corporation becomes a person, and then natural men and women lose their voice. This is what the Moors have established on Earth. Remember, they're the ones who are all about commerce because they don't, apparently their God didn't give them enough resources. So they created the Uniform Commercial Code and commerce this and commercial that and all of that. And what they want is to make everybody slaves and unable to access your own wealth. Yeah, in your land. No, they have access, not you. Right? Because they special niggas. Yeah. Why wards cannot enter contracts independently. Loss of capacity. In the eyes of the law, the appointment of a guardian signifies that the ward lacks the capacity to make binding financial or legal decisions. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, anything that was ever said that was for you, it didn't go just to you. Because you're on top of being a fictitious entity, you're a ward. Gateway, because they know at one time you were the landowners. So that's why they use you to create these little things like affirmative action, and then it ends up going to the people that they want to have it. They just have to use you as a gateway because they know that at one point you were sovereign and you really are the people of this land. So, but how they pay homage to that is they reroute shit that go to you goes to somebody else, but they'll use you. So it's for the niggas, and then everybody else gets it. Women, and all foreigners. When I say women, I'm talking about non-American Indian women. Okay. So loss of capacity. Let's read that again and over. In the eyes of the law, the appointment of a guardian signifies that the ward lacks the capacity to make binding financial or legal decisions. Point number two, guardian authority. In most cases, only the court-appointed guardian again, the church appointed our guardian, the United States, right? Or conservator has the legal authority to sign binding agreements and control property. They call our ancestral land property, they rename it, on the ward's behalf. That one is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Let's read that again. Guardian authority. In most cases, only the court-appointed guardian or conservator in a conservatorship has the legal authority to sign binding agreements and control property. Control, ladies and gentlemen. What you lost, American Indian, is control of your land. They can drill, they can do whatever, mine, they can do anything they want on your land. And you there with a bottle in your mouth, and they probably feeding you some fucking uh genetically altering concoction, okay? Trying to make you fictitious or something, you know? You there with a big bottle of baba in your mouth, and they doing all the wheeling and dealing. Right, ladies and gentlemen? Well, if you're aware of what's going on, you would say right. Guardian authority. We got to read this again. In most cases, only the court-appointed guardian or conservator has the legal authority to sign binding agreements and control, we're going to call it the land, on the ward's behalf, meaning they get to steal from you forever when they eternal ward. So who's getting the benefit of our land? Their offspring. And we are considered in debt to them. Isn't that some crazy work, y'all? Ain't that some crazy Roman work, y'all? English Roman work? Oh boy. They have exceptions to the rule. Let's see what they gotta say with these except. I don't even want to read this. Oh, limited guardianship orders, minors and incapacitated versus incapacitated adults and necessities. Well, they're not making any exceptions, so we're not going to read these exceptions, ladies and gentlemen, because what we don't want to be wards, period. We don't want to be wards with exceptions. So I'm not reading this, ladies and gentlemen. We're not supposed to be wards, is the point. So we're not going to go into reading the exceptions to the rule. We're going to make our own rules where maybe they should be wards since they like playing ward games. Maybe we could be their guardian for a change. And let's show them how it feels. They would never want that, right, ladies and gentlemen? They'd never agree to that shit, right, ladies and gentlemen? No one would. So let's get back to this ChatGPT conversation. So the UCC and commercial law confusion. In the 20th century, especially after the creation of the Uniform Law Commission, I wonder who created it. Somebody without your consent. And adoption of the Uniform Commercial Code, some researchers began interpreting commercial law as proof that every citizen is a commercial entity. Sure enough, governments operate entirely through contract law. Yeah, but when they have wards, they sign the contracts, not the American Indians. Legal names are corporate vessels. Yeah, legal names are in all capital. Why do you do that? Because it's a mass. This interpretation spread heavily through sovereign citizens literature in the 1970s and the 1990s. It's the fucking truth. And in fact, that is what the state nationals are saying. And these state nationals are not in prison, ladies and gentlemen. Nope. Glenn Fern is not in prison. Anna von Reitz is not in prison because what they're doing is not actually illegal in this system. They just saw the freaking wizard behind the curtain. So don't let them, they'll always like to throw that sovereign citizen shit at you. Glenn Fern is so on top of this shit that he found out that I'm sorry, not we. Oops. I'm an American Indian. I'm not part of none of this. And when we as American Indian makes our laws, there won't be any of this to deal with. But Glenn Fern is so deep with it that he found out that there is a concept of sovereign citizen in the United States laws. But the way they tell it is like sovereign citizen is a bad word. They make it like that's you get in trouble for saying the word sovereign citizen. Yet Glenn Fern found it in one of their laws. They use the term sovereign citizen. The United States did. But when one of the citizens use it, the United States has a problem. That's how janky this shit is, yo. They used the term sovereign citizen in one of their laws, ladies and gentlemen, and it wasn't an illegal use of it. It was a legal use of the term sovereign citizen. Glenn Fern found that shit. Props to Glenn Fern. I gotta say, he when he goes in, he goes the fuck in, yo. No, he don't belong here as under American Indians Authority. He wouldn't belong here. He'd have to create some kind of agreement with us. So no, him being here under the state, even though he's claiming to be a state national, states are foreign to American Indians. We did not create the states. We didn't create any of these states, ladies and gentlemen. That's why they're illegal. Remember, we were wards. Our guardians created the states, not us. And the guardian is getting paid, not us. We got to make our own money if we want money too. Because we use guardian money. That shit got kickbacks for guardian, not for us. But courts never officially endorse those conclusions. They never would. But when a sovereign I'm sorry, when a state national knows what he's doing, the courts have no fucking choice, I promise you. Glenn Fern deals with the courts all the damn time. The name of his site, ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you visit it every now and then and see how he is breaking down that this is all commerce. It's not law. It's commerce. He breaks it down pretty nicely. His website, Sovereign Living. Look it up on YouTube, Sovereign Living. Now, again, we're not supposed to be like Glenn because we are the owners of the land. But through people like Glenn, they help us to see the fraud. You see? So they are actually, I believe the ancestors are doing the work of turning, as uh, their scripture says, turning their weapons against us into weapons against them. But that don't mean we run and become Christian, ladies and gentlemen. That's all their system. They have a sacrifice system. What does that mean? Somebody has to die to get love from God. Shall I say it again? What does a sacrifice system or spirituality mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means in order to get God's love, something has to die. Do you believe that that's how God loves? You tell me. And I'm going to tell you that that's not the God that I would ever serve willingly. And I never did uh, because what? It was forced on me by my guardian. Okay? I never chose this beast. What happened was I was under mental manipulation. Levels to this, ladies and gentlemen. They have to make it look like we agreed to this, but it'll never stick with real karma because karma knows who agrees knowingly and karma knows who agrees unknowingly. And that's what saves our black asses, our alleged black asses. Karma knows who is fully aware of what they're doing and who is not. And these MFers, I guess that's why the sacrifice part is necessary because once they get us to be deaded, then we won't get a chance, So that's why I think a sacrifice system is also necessary, is because they got to catch you while you're green and you don't know what's going on and sacrifice that ass. Okay? What courts actually recognize? Okay, here's where we're going to get some bullshit, ladies and gentlemen. Courts do not recognize distinctions like natural person. Wait. Courts do. I'm sorry. What courts actually recognize? Courts do recognize distinctions like natural person and legal person. So the courts know that there's a distinction between a natural person, a living human being, a legal person, an entity capable of suing, being sued, holding rights, entering contracts. Courts do recognize natural person. Well, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. These are not our courts. It really doesn't matter to us what they recognize because they're here again without our agreement. So this is being imposed. What they recognize is being imposed on us and bidding us to recognize what they recognize, but we don't have to. Not rebellion. This is what sovereign men and women know for a fact. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be different if we actually agreed or submitted willingly to what these courts recognize. We never did, ladies and gentlemen. Do you understand that we have been forced to go with what these courts recognize? Do you see that, ladies and gentlemen? Can you see that? Really not complicated. It's like someone coming up to you out of the blue and saying, "You owe me $50." And you have to say, "Did I agree that I owe you 50?" Like, did I, first of all, when did I lend you $50? Or I'm sorry, when did you lend me $50? Uh, and was it something that I signed on? Did I make a contract with you for this loan? Or did you run by and throw $50 at me and keep pushing and then come back and say, and I just took it, because it looked like you gave it to me. And I spent it, and now you say I owe you $50, but I didn't agree to it. So I don't owe you. Like, so if that, say that went to court and the person argued that I lent them $50, judge, and they didn't pay me back. The judge will say, well, can you prove to me that they agreed to pay you back or you had an agreement to do so? No, I was running by and I threw my $50 at them and I kept going. But then later on, I decided I wanted it back and I went to go get them and they said they spent it already. Well, you shouldn't have threw the $50 at them. What were they supposed to think? You kept going. You didn't stop and say, "Give me my $50 back." You threw the $50 and then you looked back and smiled and kept going. And so they don't really owe you anything, do they? Um, Similar to that situation, because that situation is a little tricky. But the fact remains that if you didn't have an agreement with this person, there is nothing to argue. There was no written agreement, and we didn't have the authority to write an agreement or to sign an agreement, I should say, ladies and gentlemen. We definitely didn't have a right to make an agreement. We They will say that we could sign off on something, but that's bullshit. Because wards cannot. We saw a ward cannot sign for something without their guardian's approval. But that means it's a conflict of interest, ladies and gentlemen. You see what I'm saying? It's not willingly. The key factor is, was the alleged ward willingly giving you this authority? No, the church did. The doctrine of discovery did. We did not even invite them to this landmass. So what courts actually recognize? Well, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. We don't really care what they recognize because it doesn't, they're not our courts. So that can include corporations, trusts, governments, and humans in legal context. But courts do not recognize a secret straw man separate from the living person. The idea that one can reject legal obligations by separating from a capitalized name. But who put my names in capital? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is why we don't want to read this because the courts are janky. They just told us that they do recognize distinction from a natural person and a legal person. Okay, so is a straw man a natural person? And why did you say secret? It's the only reason it's a secret because most people don't know that this thing is a straw man. They use the term straw man. There's a legal term for the word straw man. Okay, let's look it up, ladies and gentlemen. Let's look it up because this they trying to tell us that the courts don't know what a straw man is. Baby, you made up a legal word for the straw man. What's now? So I'm gonna off camera. We're gonna ask AI what is the legal term for a straw man? Because I we there is a okay. What is the legal term for a straw man? If there's a legal term for a straw man, ladies and gentlemen, that means this government knows very well what a straw man is. Tell me that because there is a word for it. In a legal context, a straw man is exactly that. The official term is simply a straw man or straw man. Okay, so they're saying there is a legal term for it. This what we just read is courts do not recognize a straw man separate from the okay. See, they adding stuff. We got to break this down. They said they don't recognize a straw man separate from the living person, but they do recognize a straw man. Of course, they don't want you to be separate from your straw man because they expect somebody to pay the bill that they send into the straw man. You see? So they don't want you to be separate, but you are two different entities. One is all capital, and you don't capitalize on your name. There is a word though, ladies and gentlemen, and they're not somehow it's not the word for it. Strominus or some shit. Oh, but they're saying straw man will do. They say they don't want to tell me the word, ladies and gentlemen. What is the legal term for the word? What is the legal word? What is the legal term for the word? What? Okay, maybe I should say the Latin term. What is the legal word for legal? Okay, what is the Latin term? What is the Latin legal term? Let's see what that brings. Latin legal legal. Okay, what is a Latin legal term for the word straw man? Let's see what they say. Strawmaneus homo. Okay, the Latin term for remember this is all Roman, right? Roman. So this would be the original word in Roman law is Strawmaneus homo or Strawmaneus homo. I don't, which literally translates to man of straw. Okay. And in the Wizard of Oz, there was a straw man, right? Who didn't have a brain because he did, because a lot of us don't understand what it is to be a straw man. The Latin legal term for a straw man, a nominal person or entity used as a front to conceal the true owner or avoid liability. Oh, I'm liking this, yo. I got to take a screenshot of this. This is what we said earlier, ladies and gentlemen. This is all to avoid liability. Why would you want to enter into any kind of business with somebody who's trying to avoid liability? You see why we need to get rid of this type of thing, ladies and gentlemen. So you want people to act in earnest, but you give them every reason not to act in earnest when you create fictitious entities. If they can get away with shit using their fictitious entity, you don't think they're going to try it? Common law, Roman law, English law? You give them an out and you don't think they're going to take it? Why would you give them an out? Are you encouraging fraud? Of course they are, ladies and gentlemen. Of course they are. When you stealing is nasty work, ladies and gentlemen. You got to make it look good. Let's read that again. The Latin term for a straw man, a nominal person or entity. Men and women are not entities. Corporate things are entities. Used as a front to conceal the true owner or avoid liability. So somebody wants to fuck you over and avoid liability after they have done so. Understand now what this whole system is based upon? So the Latin legal term for a straw man or a nominal person or entity used as a front to conceal the true owner or avoid liability is stramonius homo, which literally translates to man of straw. The legal context of Stramonius Homo Act as a passive stand. Okay. They have no real beneficial interest in the transaction and are primarily used for several strategic reasons. Number one, concealment, to hide the identity of the true principal or buyer. Number two, circumvention, to bypass regulations or prohibitions when the true party cannot legally hold a license. E.g., when the true party cannot legally hold a license. Say the man or woman can't hold a license. So they create a straw man and they can bypass the need for a license. Conveyance, to facilitate property transfers, especially in older real estate practices. So you use a straw man for property quote unquote transfers. Understanding Stramonius Homo is central to fields like property and corporate law. To learn more about how stand-ins function in contracts and property transactions, you can read the Legal Information Institute strawman definition, or check out the encyclopedia.com strawman overview. If you are dealing with a specific transaction or need to understand how Stramonius Homo relates to a legal dispute, let me know. Is this related to real estate or corporate ownership? Are you trying to determine liability in an ongoing agreement? I can help clarify how the law treats these proxy arrangements in your specific situation. So that's AI trying to help me commit fraud. Thank you, but no thank you, AI. But I do appreciate what you're telling me. So, ladies and gentlemen, what fun we're having today learning about the legal system and all this commerce, what's involved in land seizure. Oh boy. The philosophical, okay, courts do not recognize a secret straw man. Us, I guess they're saying it's not a secret to us. The idea that one can reject legal obligations by separating from a capitalized name. That's exactly what state nationals are doing, ladies and gentlemen. They're saying basically that because there's no legal money, they they can discharge their debts. So they are, it's a way, it's like you could say they're not rejecting the obligation, they're just finding a way to deal with it, but it is rejecting the idea that they have to come out of pocket to pay the government. And that's why right now everything is so sky high because between these state nationals not paying taxes and American Indians also becoming aware of that, because remember, ladies and gentlemen, I sent some letters to public officials, you know, stating why I don't owe real estate taxes or any taxes. So the government is aware. And so it seems to me that their answer to that is okay, we're just going to raise the price of everything else that you could possibly need. And that's how we'll get paid. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? Why these prices got to go up so high for? Huh? Because they're trying to compensate. And I'm going to tell you right now, the state nationals mean business. Now, I know, see, Indians could mean business if they stop trying to go by laws that don't apply to them. But half the Indians that I see, they're just all trying to figure out how to even act in private. Well, acting in private is similar to being a state national. It really actually is. But again, Indians are not state nationals. Indians are American Indians. They don't have to go by none of this. Indians don't have to pay for shit because we don't owe shit. Now, it might be an argument with citizens, but the citizens are saying they don't owe either because the citizens are saying, oh, we only gave you 19 enumerated functions. You came up with all them other over 220 on your own. Why should we pay you for doing work that we didn't ask you to do? So to me, that's a legitimate argument, ladies and gentlemen. Even though I know state nationals are rather illegitimate in the Americas because we American Indians never created states. We never invited colonists. We didn't invent states. We didn't create them, y'all. And we didn't invite people to live in them. Who did that? Well, the church gave these nobility, European nobility, the quote unquote janky ass right to come and take from us. And that's what they started doing. They said, well, we're going to need some people there that we can control because these Indians ain't going to submit to us that easily. But if we plant some people that we can control, we can spread our domination to the American Indians slowly but surely. That's exactly what they did. They thought if they just put a bunch of subjects here and make them like as if they're a majority, we just going to have to fall in line because they're going to be dominating the subjects. And then the subjects break off, and these motherfuckers decided to make a black and white caste system. So even the colonists are janky. Okay, it's one thing for the nobility to be janky, but the colonists who are the victims of this subjugation, for them to turn around and then try to subjugate American Indians, you damn Moors, that is totally unacceptable. See, when we was up there fighting in your damn wars, completely unacceptable. So you could say once the colonists broke free, somehow with the help of the Moors, they created a system that discriminates against us more than, it seems to me, more than what the British nobility did. Yes, the British nobility imposed themselves, but the colonists, once they started creating their laws, wait a minute, when did the Pocahontas exception? When did that po? Okay, let's. Okay, we got to find out if the Pocahontas exception happened after independence or before independence. So let's look it up, ladies and gentlemen. Off camera, look up. Okay. When was the Pocahontas except we saw this, ladies and gentlemen. I just forgot. Okay. I do think it's after independence. Now that I'm typing it in. Exception. When was the Pocahontas exception put into effect? Established. When was established? Okay. Was after colonization, after independence, ladies and gentlemen. It was. It had to be. But let's look. Are you going to answer me? Oh, way after independence. The Pocahontas exception was established on March 20th, 1924. It was written into a law as a specific provision within within Virginia. It was written into law as a specific provision within Virginia's Racial Integrity Act. Right, it was part of the Integrity Act. Um, Key details of the exception. Now, we would say that, well, it's in 1924, so they must be talking about Native Americans. No, they're not. They're talking about colored people. So the rule, the May 1924 Act enacted a strict one-drop rule, legally defining a white person as someone who has no trace whatsoever of any blood other than Caucasian. The loophole. Okay, so the main act was you had to be pure white with no drops. But the exception, the Pocahontas exception, explicitly allowed individuals with 1/16 or less of American Indian blood and no other non-white ancestry to still be legally classified white. So when they say 1/16, it's not Native American blood. They said American Indian blood. Right here, they're saying that, ladies and gentlemen. They did not use the term Native American. But we know that with that, otherwise they would be called colored. So, in other words, these white people would be called colored, right? Not Native American. If they had 1/16 of American Indian blood, they would be called colored, not Native American. Let's say that again, ladies and gentlemen. The loophole, the Pocahontas exception explicitly allowed individuals with 1/16 or less of American Indian blood and no other non-white ancestry to still be legally classified white. Ladies and gentlemen, what were the two classifications? They were white and colored. We should have just said that. So you had to be white or colored. But if you were white and you had 1/16 of colored blood, you could still be called white. And do you think they had some kind of little measurement tool? No, they didn't, ladies and gentlemen. They were going by what you look like. In other words, if a person could look at you and tell that you had a little bit of Negro blood, then you would be called white regardless, even though you had a little bit of Negro blood and it was visible. So maybe your hair wasn't as straight. Maybe your lips was a little big. Maybe um, you weren't quite Caucasian. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we're saying is they couldn't do this with any of the civilized tribes because they're not first contact. It wouldn't it wouldn't work for them because they're just going to be called colored off the bat. You see? But again, it's because they don't have a significance that Pocahontas had. Pocahontas had the significance of being one of the Indians that were found here. Iroquois are not Indians that were found here. You see? You have to be an Indian that was found here, documented found here first by English colonizers. If they found you 80 years later, they can argue that you were not the first Indians, and they will. They that's why they created you, because they need some Indians that are not first contact. But all of us were Algonquin speaking. So we are all technically first contact Indians, but colonizer recreated civilized Indians, and they became as if they were not first contact because they don't have the same name. They're not called Algonquin. So colonizer had to change the name because he knows that the records say that he found Algonquins here. So now the word Algonquin goes underground because colonizers don't want anybody to be as if they are first contact when all American Indians are first contact. Just by you stepping on our land and finding any of us, we are all first contact because all you're going to see is Indians here. But when you rename them, you can argue that they were not first contact because they showed up 80 years later. There was not even a word for Iroquois. It can be argued that there was no such thing as Iroquois when colonizers found Algonquins. Now, colonizers will say, yeah, it's Iroquois. Yeah, but you just promoting a secondary Indian for your own benefit. So you like the word Iroquois because it keeps you from dealing with saying that or dealing with the fact that you first saw Algonquins here. And so they are officially, just by word recognition, Algonquins are first contact. See, I never know how to say this before, ladies and gentlemen. And now that I figured out how to say it, I'm just screaming from the rooftops. I'm super repetitive in the last 2 or 3 videos. You gotta understand. See, I've always known this. I think I just never said it the way I can say it now. Deprogramming takes time. So I think we're gonna do the rest of this video and call it a video because we take it a while. A philosophical question underneath it. Your question touches a deeper issue. I love when ChatGPT starts trying to say, but you know what? You have a point. Yeah, I know. I know. Your question does touch a deeper issue that philosophers and political thinkers have debated for centuries. Is the state interacting with the human being directly or with an administratively constructed legal identity? The question appears in political philosophy, social contract theory, constitutional law, civil rights discussions, critiques of bureaucracy. Thinkers from many traditions argue that modern systems can reduce humans to economic units. Hello, tax identifiers. Hello, labor resources. Hello, consumers. So while the strawman theory itself is not recognized in law, oh yes it is, strawmanus homo. The way internet movements describe it, the broader concern about the commercialization and bureaucratic abstraction of human beings is a real philosophical and historical discussion. Bottom line, there is no foundational legal ruling establishing the human is outside commerce while the straw man operates within commerce. Instead, what historically developed was the legal concept of artificial persons, the administrative legal identity of citizens, commercial registration systems, registration. Somebody is not owning what they said that they own, and contractual participation in society. Later movements expanded those real concepts into the modern strawman theory, but courts have consistently rejected the more extreme interpretations. Yeah, the courts will reject it because it's not in their best interest. The distinction you are drawing between trade and commerce is partly historical. Okay, we got a little more to go. I thought we were at the end, ladies and gentlemen. But we asked the question about why trade, why is trade so simple while commerce is so requiring fictitious entities? So we're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to stop our share for a minute and we're going to pause and we shall. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Pardon, that was a bit of a lengthy break. I went got me something to eat. And if I don't jump on it, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm an Indian, but sometimes I get infected with niggeritis. Niggeritis. Or should we call it Indianitis? Okay. So I forgot that. Oh, we got 11 pages here. I thought we were coming to the end of this. We got like six more pages to go. So it's some fancy word work, you know. They said the court does not recognize secret straw men, you know, because it ain't no secret. So the bottom line is there is no foundational legal ruling. Yeah. It's not in the legal system, ladies and gentlemen. It's in the doctrine of discovery. That's how we should have answered this. They say there's no foundational legal ruling establishing the human is outside of commerce, while a straw man operates within commerce. But let Glenn Fern tell you, he's gonna say this is all. He says his his phrase is that he's being assaulted with the Commerce Clause. He says everything the system is doing, it adds up to him as a state citizen being assaulted with the Commerce Clause. And I just thought that's a perfect way to put it because we're all being assaulted with commerce. We're being sort of subject to a very dominating commercial thing. And, you know, they talk about monopolies, but, you know, monopolies are where a government really gets to actually dominate through the monopoly. So, yeah. Um, yeah. So, we read this. So instead, what historically developed was the legal concept of artificial persons. Now, American Indians were the first, maybe, well, let's look at this now. Because the citizens are a form of artificial persons, but United States citizens, that is the artificial person that is really created by the federal government. The other citizens, the state citizens, were not created by the federal government, but they sort of came as a result of states. But the American Indian, we were the first ones to be put directly into the frying pan of, or the fire of commerce. We went from being what they call privately owned slaves to publicly owned slaves, owned by the federal government. Once they created the United States citizen, uh, American Indians went straight to the domination direct domination of the federal government, whereas the state citizens were only dealing with state governments that they populated. Now, the United States American Indian citizen thing, he's not represented in the federal government. You see? He's just the property, the financial property, the chattel property of the federal government. But what the federal government gains is the access to our land because, as little known as it is, the land is ours. So once the federal government makes us its little bitch, that little bitch comes with a whole lot of land, you see? So the federal government did pretty well with this fraud, man. They got more than what the states got. You could say that the federal government got the whole entire United States, whereas the states, each state, they just got that little state right there. But the United States, where they got all the Negroes as United States citizens who never asked to be, they just came, hey, like, we got to help the slaves, right? It was a little help, ladies and gentlemen. It wasn't just a little help, right? They said these Negroes need charity. Although they got all this land, they need charity from us. And so they said, we're going to give you a United States citizenship. How about that? And we thought, oh my goodness, you emancipated me from these Moorish Negroes? Okay, well, I guess I'll come up north then, because, the Moors done got my land, because I was the indenture of the Moor, apparently, right? Unless you want to believe that some Mongolians was dominating you, I really don't see that, but I can see how Moors could swindle us. I really can. I truly can. We recall a video where a woman was being interviewed. I think it was CBS way back in the but it was back there, but it was when they had TV, so it wasn't that long ago when they were interviewing a woman talking about how she worked in the field all day from sun up to sundown, leaving her children at home, right? The little boy to mind for the little girl who's even younger than him. Now, this is a little boy. What the hell he know about taking care of a little girl, no less? But he was left with the girl because the Negro had the mother in the field all day working for pennies. That's what the Moors did, y'all. I know we can't. It's like, why? We gotta do the math, ladies and gentlemen. I told you, we gotta go through the ugly before we could get to the beautiful. And the ugly is this United States. Who do you think would have the real balls, y'all, to actually call themselves dominating us? Of course, if they look like us, we're going to think it's not that bad. And I'm sure they made it like it wasn't that bad. Like, in other words, you could picture the Negro Moor telling you, okay, we just got to work because, that's how we're going to make money in this system. You got to pick this cotton, and the more you pick, don't worry, it's going to pay off. Just keep picking, And I'll talk to the white man. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. You just keep picking. Because, we lost the war, and, something like that, ladies and gentlemen. We have to face the fact that we were not, quote unquote, slaves to no Mongolians. So if we were not slaves to Mongolians, who were we made slaves of? It was the ones who looked like us, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. 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 Now they married into the family, so they became like family, but they put us to work. In other words, I believe that we were told that that was the way to keep our house or our farm or whatever. We just have to bring a quota to the white man. As long as we could do that, we could keep the farm, whatever. And if we fall short, oh gosh, we got to pray. We got to pray to their God. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I'm seeing. I know it's hard to imagine that on top of everything else, we was being subjugated by people that look like us, but who's advising us? Who's been advising? We trusted them because they look like us. That's the only way they could get away with this, ladies and gentlemen. That's the only way. But I think what they did was they convinced us that unfortunately we had to work really hard, right? So that's how they got us to submit to hard labor because we were being promised certain things and being told it wouldn't be so bad. You could still keep your farm if you just work, 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 you know. Well, what happened is we end up migrating to the north, and it had to be the civilized tribes that kept the land. But then they had to be replaced by Mongoloids because they don't want us to know the truth. So when you wonder, how did these Negroes turn Mongolian? Well, they didn't want to be known for what they was doing, y'all, but now they're saying that it was the Mongolians that enslaved us. But the first American Indians people, or the classification was colored and white. So it couldn't have been Mongolians, right? That was the quote unquote slave master. It had to be somebody called colored in the South. And we saw that they had that whole republic, all black folks, right? So who was running shit in the South, yo? Who was running shit in the South with that black republic? It was them Republicans making us work, right? That's what I'm seeing. I don't know. You tell me, y'all. What makes more sense to you? You think that was the white man doing all that? That's what we're told. That's what we're led to believe, right? But they're telling us it was the civilized tribes all up in the South. It just makes more sense to me, ladies and gentlemen, that it was Algonquins being made quote unquote indentures to the five civilized tribes. Because remember, you are uncivilized. So your punishment is, I suppose, is you got to be working for the civilized. But they're acceptable. That's what makes sense to me, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all might say, huh, he don't know what he talking about. That's what I'm seeing. Okay, so let's get out of here. So now we want to talk about the distinction. Okay, so ChatGPT is saying the distinction you are drawing between trade and commerce is partly historical, partly philosophical, and partly ideological. Ideological. There is a meaningful difference between the two concepts. But it is important not to treat commerce itself as a secret system designed specifically to convert humans into products. Well, trade doesn't do that. And commerce is showing signs that it does. The reality is more historical and structural than that. Huh. Here's the clearest way to understand it: trade versus commerce. The basic difference: trade. Because my thought, ladies and gentlemen, is just trade. You don't have to be fake. You don't need a third party. That's the biggest thing I get from this is that, well, you'll see there's a third party in commerce that might not exist in trade. Trade is the older and simpler concept. So that's what American Indians did. Trade generally means the direct exchange of goods or services between people or groups. Examples: bartering corn for tools, exchanging furs for cloth, local marketplace exchange, tribe to tribe exchange routes. Trade can exist informally, locally, without centralized governments. So they're saying commerce requires centralized governments. Really? I don't think so, but in their world it does. So that's a third party, the centralized government. Without trade can exist without banking system. Nothing wrong with that. Trade can exist without complex legal structures. So trade doesn't need centralized governments, banking systems, or complex legal structures. Human societies traded for thousands of years before modern states or corporations existed. So now a state comes along or a corporation comes along, and suddenly we can't be human anymore, right? Because there's two other entities that are looking to get paid, states and corporations, is how I'm reading it. It was much simpler back then because the profit was just two ways. Now we're looking at possibly four ways: human to human, two, and then states and corporations, or states or corporations, and commerce. Commerce is broader. Commerce means the organized system surrounding large scale exchange. Why does it have to be so large, though, ladies and gentlemen? Does it have to be large like that? Well, now you're talking some kind of, it's a government looking to feed its people. That's what I'm getting. Now it's like we don't want a little bit of stuff. We so at a loss of certain things. We need to do it large scale. See, commerce really is for people that got big ideas but don't have the resources to match. England is a small place. The United States is a large place, or the Americas, I should say, is a large place. So you got a small dog looking at our resources saying, how can I collect from something like that? So I need something big so I can get paid big. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? It's almost like perhaps commerce can only be done with two nations that both have equal amounts of resources. Because if one is very small and lacking resources, but looking to get paid as if it has lots of resources, we have a problem, ladies and gentlemen. And we've had this problem for over 500 years in the Americas. First of all, you're a little nation. You don't need that much. You certainly do not. Because to feed your people, you shouldn't require all this so big, has to be so damn big. Where you got to control the entire other nation's resources. Because now you're looking outside of your landmass. American Indians, we just trying to feed and house our people. You looking to dip into our resources to feed and house the world. So commerce got dreams and ambitions beyond their own needs. So commerce means it has to be large scale. But if you're a small nation with little resources, how going to be large scale though? Commerce is about greed, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just cut to the chase, okay? So it includes trade, contracts, transportation, banking, insurance. Oh Lord. This all sounds like ways to charge more than necessary. Insurance, credit, corporate law, shipping, taxation, regulation, currency system. Whose currency though? One of the parties only? International markets. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that list to me, you're talking about some kind of nobility who's looking to be a middleman. That's what I'm seeing to make sure that they get paid. Okay, because that's what happened, ladies and gentlemen. Indians are not partaking in commerce; they're making us consumers, using our resources and making us consumers of our own resources, and we're paying for our own resources. That's what the effect of commerce. Let's just be real. So trade is the exchange itself. Commerce is the infrastructure governing and scaling exchange. We don't need that, is what I'm saying. We really don't need that. First of all, a country as big as the Americas, we would have to be in charge of all our shit, and we should be able to do all of that ourselves. Be our own middleman, and at the same time be fair and equitable with whoever we're trading with. We don't need a middle person. Now they saying something about we're going to see what they're going to talk about. Oh, but you need protection from pirates. Yeah, you sure you wasn't the pirate? Why commerce developed? Commerce largely developed because civilizations grew beyond small local exchanges. Once societies expanded, they needed systems for long distance trade, maritime shipping, debt enforcement, standardized weights and measures, currency. Keep talking about currency. Yet one currency is dominating almost the whole thing, right? Who created the currency? Merchant protections, taxation, the same list again, inheritance, and property law? Huh? What that got to do with commerce, though? Well, when the colonizer is seizing your land, he gonna include that, I guess. Empires and nation states required larger economic coordination systems. So commerce evolved historically as economies became more complex, more centralized, more international. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't invite anybody over here to do this. Where the concern about human commodification comes from. This is where your deeper point enters. Critics of modern commerce argue that industrial and financial systems increasingly treat humans as labor units, consumers, yeah, debtors, statistics, economic assets, and taxable resources. Yep. We are, as quiet as it's kept, ladies and gentlemen, citizens were pledged to be collateral, okay, in this debt that the United States racked up. This criticism became especially strong during industrialization, colonial expansion. Yeah, this is all about colonial expansion. The rise of central banking. Yeah, central banks, they got to hoard that wealth. Corporate capitalism. Yeah. So busy capitalizing that people, men and women, become less and less important, and it's all about cutting a profit, even if the quality of the whatever is in commerce is poor. So it's all about, it just becomes too greed ready. You know, philosophers like Karl Marx argue that capitalism can reduce human labor into a commodity. Other critics argued modern states convert citizens into economic inventory, workforce resources, administrative units. Yeah. When you're taxing the income of a man or woman, you're making them like a little administrative unit, or a little, like a little corporation, not a man or woman. And now their names are being capitalized, right? So you might say you're killing the man or woman by making their names all in capitals, because they say capitals are on two things: corporations and tombstones. Those critics are real intellectual traditions. Those critiques are real intellectual traditions. Did commerce replace trade? Not exactly. Commerce expanded around trade. Trade still exists inside commerce. Hmm. For example, a farmer selling produce at a market is trade. The banking system, trucking network, licensing, taxes, contracts, and payment processing around it are commerce. So you need a license to trade. You need taxes to trade, contracts, network, payment processing. Were humans turned into commodities? This depends on the sense in which the phrase is used. Literally, no. Well, ain't nobody, nobody talking. Modern law does not officially define ordinary citizens as corporate products or inventory items. Well, that's what slaves are, right? Debt slaves are slaves, aren't they? And when you put them into debt, they don't own anything, and everything is registered, and they don't. They're not the well, they're not the owners. They're the tenants. Even their children are given certificates. So seems a little like inventory type of things. A little bit like cattle, chattel, whatever you want. Economically, in some contexts, aspects of human activity are treated economically. Labor markets, insurance, valuations, employment systems, credit scores, actuarial actuarial calculations. Modern economies assign measurable economic value to labor. Okay. Before you're born, they give you the birth certificate is speculating on how much you'll make in a lifetime. So your birth certificate is given a monetary value, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is. I know this because as a state national, that's what they're dealing with, that birth stock certificate. And they're saying that's what you're getting paid from, the value that they gave you. That ain't nobody paying you. They paying you from the dollar amount they assign to your birth certificate, which is usually no less than $1 million. Which in a time like this, I'm thinking it's got to be a little more than $1 million with all this inflation. That's what led the whole Nasara thing, finding out that money is not coming from the banks, it's coming from the stock certificate that is a birth certificate. So they're making you pay for an amount that it came from you. They said when you sign a mortgage or, the first signature the house is paid for out of your trust TDA account. Yeah. And they try to deny this, ladies and gentlemen, but it's there. That you could find this stuff. They changed it up because people found out. But there was a bank where you could plug in your birth certificate, stock certificate number, and figure out the bank that holds your stock and shit. Yeah, yeah. They're trying to clean it up a little bit later, but this fraud, it has been going on so long. Even when it was found out, they continued. That Nasara was about finding out this bank fraud, y'all. The fact that banks don't actually give you anything, they're taking something from you, if anything. But your lords and masters don't want you to know that they have monetized you and having fun playing with your little I don't know, your little commodity ass. Your little stock certificate ass. And they will lie and say, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. Well, they said the paper that the birth certificate is on is the same paper that a stock certificate is on. Why do they on the same type of paper, y'all? That's a legal document, y'all. Why would they put it on stock stock certificate stock? Why would they put that on there, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, it's illegal. This is legal, ladies and gentlemen. So why are they illegal? A stock certificate has a certain design. Why are they designing your birth certificate like a fucking stock certificate? They're gonna dance around it. They're not gonna tell you. You little people are not supposed to know what the big people are doing. So modern economies assign measurable economic value to labor. Yes, they do. Before you even enter the work world, you're assigned so much. And I think they go by your race. I think depending on your race is how they're gonna, you know, but the funny thing is they're gonna want to wear out your account if you not white, so you could be broke stuff. Like you're gonna owe more as a color. Because they got to, in other words, they got to make it where it's like you are so in debt that you cannot be the owners of your own land. Because look at how much debt you got. Oh my goodness. You can't be a landlord or landowner because look, you owe, but we don't owe them anything, ladies and gentlemen. We never invited them here. We didn't give them enumerated functions. Their citizens, state citizens did. United States citizens didn't assign anything to the United States. They didn't make any laws for the United States. The state citizens did. We were just American Indians. We were just grabbed into this system. We didn't give it no rules to go by. They look at us literally as their property. We're wards to the United States. Now, state citizens, they actually made the laws that the federal government is supposed to go by. American Indians didn't take part in that. You were not part of the system. You were not taxed. You were not counted according to the Constitution. You were not supposed to be counted. You're not represented in Congress. So, therefore, you didn't make any rules for Congress. State citizens did, not United States citizens. You get it? You came much too late. The state citizens gave them their enumerated functions back when the first Constitution was created. That was what? 17 1787, right? United States citizens, they came along in 1868. You didn't make no laws for this government. They grabbed you up. They did you a favor. They emancipated you. They already had laws. You didn't give them no laws. They just grabbed you and gave you laws like civil rights, Negro codes, all that. All that. You didn't tell this government nothing. You was a ward. And it's still like that. Do not be fooled. Do not be fooled. That's why American Indians got to get the hell up on out of here. You ain't got no say in this. You're a ward. And then they made state citizens wards too when they became United States citizens with a dual citizenship. They're a United States citizen and a citizen of the state that they're in. A slave and a semi-free person. And who you think they're gonna treat you like? Look around. Get a clue. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a quick pause. We'll stop share. We shall return. We're back, and I pardoned. So let's get back to what we were reading. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about corporations versus, I'm sorry, commerce versus trade. Okay. And they're trying to tell us that commerce is so much more complex. Well, when you want to get at a country's entire resources, you're going to make it more complex because you want to use up all of our resources and get a maximum profit while we are the wards and you are our guardian. So it becomes complex because you're taking more than we're given. You see? That's why it's complex. And again, I think there's a lot more going out than coming in, is what I want to say. In other words, there's a lot more resources going out than we have resources coming in. Okay. This thing is where they're profiting off of the citizens, not from no trade. A real economy would be the citizens are safe from all the shenanigans and the money making schemes and dreams of their own freaking government. You see? So they're busy making money from the citizens and from the people that they are stealing the resources of the original people from. You know, so they're making money coming and going. They're charging the original people for shit. They're getting paid for the stuff that belongs to the original people. It's just a win-win, right? For the Guardian. A win-win for the Guardian. What happens when the Guardian is no longer a Guardian, ladies and gentlemen? Are Indians up for that dynamic? Modern economies assign measurable economic value to labor, productivity, demographics, future earnings. For who? Critics say this creates a dehumanizing effect. I think we can all agree that it does. Slavery is the clearest historical example. Historically, there was a system where humans literally became commercial property, chattel slavery. And we had that here too, right? That's how they're able to get the resources. Just make slaves of the people that own the resources. In that system, human beings were legally commodified. Yeah. And so was everybody else. We were commodified again, ladies and gentlemen, when they made us United States citizens. Then they made even white people United States citizens, but they have a dual citizenship. So they have like some options, you know. But still, state nationals are here saying they don't want that option. They're saying we do just fine without the United States citizenship. United States. This whole thing is imploding, ladies and gentlemen. They got too damn greedy. That's what happens when you're so freaking greedy. You know, you just lose your damn mind, right, United States? In that system, human beings were legally commodified. That is one reason many modern thinkers are sensitive to systems that appear to reduce people into purely economic functions. The entity question. You mentioned entities. Modern legal systems require legal identities because large societies need ways to track ownership. How about just track, period? Enforce contracts. Now they laying down the law on your ass. Whereas lately you get a occurrence like the whole Epstein thing, and like we said, all those people are protected. They're redacted. You don't know anything. You just see some of the words they want you to see, but they're protecting certain classes of people. But if it was just us, the lowly citizens, allegedly, American Indians are not citizens, but we did get grabbed. And until we declare that that's not what we are, so force contracts, identify citizens, collect taxes, administer rights, track ownership. So governments interact with people through legal identities and records. It's interesting because their false identity allows them to get away with crap, but your false identity that they give you, it allows them to track you, tax you, enforce contract with you. Now you are contracting as a fictitious entity, but they're gonna make it like that contract is real. Now you contracted, you know, you're all well in the case of American Indian, well everybody now is based, but American Indians are a special class of wards because it's our land and our what they would call our shit their credit. So they're building their credit on our resources and us, basically. That's why they jack up stuff. Uh, you know, put us in debt, like as if we're in debt. They try to make it like we owe them something, but we don't owe them anything, unfortunately. But that false identity does owe them in their fictitious world. Their little United States citizen thing owes them something. But once we tell them that got nothing to do with American Indians, that's when all the prices got to go up. They figure we're going to get you one way or another. So that's why American Indians, we have to be protected from them, their ability to cripple us economically when they're not able to tax us. So they figure, let's just drive up all the prices, and that will, do the work of keeping these folks, poor and in need and stuff, and looking for handouts when this whole land is their handout that belongs to them. So governments interact with people through legal identities and records. That does not necessarily mean that human beings literally become a corporate product. Well, we have an income tax, right? Men and women make wages, not income, is one thing I learned from the state nationals. So if you're giving me an income tax, that means you're looking at me like a corporate product, right? See, this system tries to bat for the United States so hard. But many people feel modern systems increasingly prioritize commercial identity over human individuality. For sure they do. That concern is philosophical and political rather than proof of a hidden legal conversion process. There is a conversion. Again, they're taxing income, not wages, right? It's an income tax. Corporations make income, men and women make wages. Do the math, ChatGPT. Stop fooling yourself or trying to fool me. The most accurate historical framing. A balanced way to frame it is trade is ancient human exchange. Commerce developed as societies became larger and more administratively complex. Commerce introduced systems of law, finance, credit, and regulation. Credit. I'm just thinking there shouldn't be any, there shouldn't be credit. If you don't got it right now, just get back to me when you got it. Credit is starting to increase the price of shit and adding shit. See, this is when it gets just somebody is pocketing this, other than the two people involved in trade. Industrial and financial systems sometimes treat human activity in highly economic terms. Critics argue this can dehumanize people or reduce them to economic function. But mainstream law does not state that ordinary humans are secretly corporate commodity merely because they participate in commerce. Well, you shouldn't make any straw men. If that was true, there shouldn't be any straw men. Strawmaneus homo. So the deeper issue is less commerce secretly transformed humans into products and more modern commercial civilization increasingly organizes human life through economic systems and legal administration. So they just find a nicer way of saying that you're a product, basically, because it's required, because it's more complex. Well, the goal should be to keep humans human, no matter what. Oh, we came to the end of this, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to call this a video. I was thinking of doing another topic, but I think this has gone long enough. We went over 11 pages. And again, this topic today was about trade versus commerce. Now, I thought that there was a part of this that talked about the need for protection on the seas and to keep people from being pirated. But I think that was something else. Because my thought to that was people can just go on the sea and bring extra backup to deal with any pirating without necessarily paying a third party or asking some nation that has a bigger navy to protect us on the sea and all that. That's all paying extra for stuff, that you might want to cut those kind of costs and avoid someone ripping you off. I'm surprised that wasn't part of this because I thought that happened in this conversation about pirating. I thought they brought up pirating, but that might have been some other document. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to call it a day for this one. I was looking to talk about more other topics, but I think this has gone a while, and I think I need a break on this Memorial Day. It is allegedly. So I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah. Until next time, be and stay. First contact, American Indian.